everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Sorry, I'm jumping between meetings this morning. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I listened into a tiny bit of yesterday's sessions. It's a fascinating conference, so it's really my pleasure to be able to take part. I'm going to be talking today about the Food Systems Countdown Initiative, and if you'll permit me to just share my screen. Okay, so what I'll be talking about here is work we've been doing with the Food Systems Countdown Initiative with the goal of creating a science-based monitoring system to transform global food systems. The work that I'm talking about is a giant collaboration, including your very own Amos Lar and many other collaborators. And I have a list at the end, but I just want to make sure I kick off by saying that this is by no means just my own work that I'm representing here. It's over 60 scientists from dozens of institutions, universities, UN, etc. So it's been a huge effort. So just to give you a bit of background, why is this important? We have only a couple of years really left to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. This is really a critical moment to transform agri-food systems. And we need indicators that let us see the whole of food systems in order to guide that transformation and make priorities and take decisions. Food systems, I don't think I need to tell this audience, but they play a role in meeting all 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals. And the framework that we've put together is complementary with the SDG framework, but the SDGs don't give us everything we need to see the world from the perspective of food systems or give us the right guidance to govern our food systems towards that transformation, which is why we needed something in addition. A couple years ago, 2021, the UN Food Systems Summit focused global attention on food systems, which was a huge window of opportunity, moment of action. And this collaboration that led to the work I'm presenting today emerged out of the need coming out of that summit to have some sort of guidance on how do we monitor, how do we see where countries are now, how do they make choices, how do they see if their choices are succeeding in achieving the desired outcomes. And it also catalyzed countries to develop national food system transformation pathways. And these demonstrate that countries are thinking about what they need to do within their food systems, how food systems fit into their existing policy frameworks, and what they need to do in addition. And so it also demonstrates just that there's political will at the national level in many places across the globe. Over 100 countries have done these pathways and are working towards executing new policies to help shift the way that their food systems function. So the summit was great. The national pathways are great, but there wasn't any agreement on what to do to actually monitor progress. And so the Food Systems Countdown Initiative really formed out of a coalition of the willing, if you will, to fill that gap. And it was important from the beginning that it would be an interdisciplinary, multi-institution, scientific partnership based on kind of an independent scientific take on the evidence. There are 4 co-chair organizations whose logos you see here on this slide. And the four co-chairs of the initiative are Jose Rosero Moncayo, who leads the statistics division at FAO, Lawrence Haddad, who leads GAIN, Jess Fonzo, who's a professor of climate at the Columbia Climate School, and Mario Herrero, who is a professor of development and leads, can't remember the name of his group right now, but he's at the Cornell College of Agriculture and Life Sciences and a fellow of the Cornell Atkinson Sustainability Institute. And so since there was no scientific mechanism, what the FSCI set out to do was to provide evidence that could track progress and give decision makers guidance on how to make choices about how they would guide transformation within their own countries. It was a huge goal from the very beginning that it wasn't duplicative with other existing frameworks, and that it would only add to and complement and be kind of interoperable with other monitoring and tracking systems at different scales. And then we also had this ambition that once we have the system that, it will enable us to contribute to advancing the science of food systems themselves by actually analyzing the data and progress over time as we go forward. So we had a global vision, and here is kind of where we are now, we put out a framework and architecture paper that I'll show you kind of the substance of that in a moment, back in the fall of 2021, and that had no indicators in it. It simply had a set of themes and domains within those themes, so kind of sub-themes, we call those domains, for which we could then go forward to select indicators. And then we took 2 years to put together an indicator framework, and we went through a consultative process that I will also talk about in a moment to do that. So that got us to a baseline paper, which is actually about to come out in Nature Food in December. It was presented at the stock taking moment in July earlier this year. And then we have some ambitions going forward for additional analyses, and we will put out an annual publication with an update every year to 2030. So here is the food policy paper that we put out, and this just gives you a sense of the long list of contributors to that paper and to the initiative. So a lot of work by a lot of people. That paper laid out a food system framework. This is an adaptation of the well-known HLPE 2016 framework. So this is what gave us kind of guidance on how we would structure the monitoring of food systems. That led us to 5 themes and the domains, sub-themes within those for which we would seek indicators. So you see those here. They are diets, nutrition, and health. And in the bullet points are the domains, which you'll see food environments feature strongly. In addition, we have environment, natural resources and production, livelihoods, poverty, and equity. And those 3 together are the outcomes of food systems. And then we have 2 themes that cover cross-cutting issues, governance and resilience. So as you can see, just introducing the vocabulary that we've been using, we call the kind of large concepts, the thematic areas, and then we have these indicator domains. And under each indicator domain is where we sought to seek exact indicators that could be monitored to measure that concept. So how did we go about doing that? We have almost 60 collaborators ourselves, but we also went to dozens of additional scientists and over 500 policy stakeholders in an open consultation process in order to select the list of indicators. So we started with identifying ourselves, the collaborators, the full universe that we thought of as possible candidates. We screened those for feasibility, coverage across countries, and transparency of their methodology. So anything that didn't have data or didn't have data for enough countries or might not have any more data before 2030 or had kind of a black box methodology were excluded at that screening stage. So that led us to 98 indicators that we sent forward in the consultation process. And that had 2 parts. One was a survey to additional scientists where we asked them to do quantitative scoring of both the indicators that have been selected and the chosen data source to measure that indicator. And we took all these indicators and the concepts to wider policy consultations, which were day-long events in 6 regions organized by FAO around the world. And we again asked in those conversations then to discuss these evaluative criteria that you see here. All of that led us to adding 12 indicators based on the consultations and removing a whole bunch that didn't make it through. And so we got to a final list of 50 indicators. So this is just a little bit more about how we operationalized those screening criteria and what feasibility, coverage, and transparent methodology meant. I'm not going to go over this in detail in the interest of time, but I wanted you to know that I'll share these slides, and we're happy to send them out to anyone who's interested. And then similarly, how we operationalized the evaluative criteria. So these were the descriptions that were given to the people who filled out the survey and were used in the consultations in the day-long dialogues with policy stakeholders. So here's where we got to. I'm just showing you the example here from the diets, nutrition, and health theme. So we have our 3 domains, and within each domain, you can see the specific indicators that were selected. And so for food environments, we have the cost of a healthy diet, which is monitored annually by FAO in their suite of food security indicators. The availability of fruits and vegetables, also monitored by FAO. The retail value of ultra-processed foods, which is based on data that we have been able to acquire from Euromonitor, as well as one SDG fits right in here, the % of the population using safely managed drinking water. So those are the indicators that ended up getting selected to monitor food environments. And I'll say a little bit more also about some of the data gaps we found in a moment. So this maps closely to the themes and action areas, which are the terminology used in the food system transformation pathways. And so we have done that alignment, and that's one of the supplementary materials that we have put together for our presentation. And we think that that is really helpful to help countries identify where in their transformation pathway we may have selected a high quality indicator that they could include in their own decision-making and monitoring practices. So getting to the findings, once we put together the data of these 50 selected indicators, the first thing that we looked at is how available are these data? We had some criteria that would get us to data that would be sufficiently available, but we had a real variation in the amount for especially the time series available. So we have a lot of data for the things that have been historically collected by FAO, to no one's surprise. But what we have less data on are diet quality, livelihoods, and resilience. So we have sparse coverage across countries and fewer years of data for most of the indicators, even where we have some data. We can also look at how countries are doing on each of these indicators by income group. So this is just an analysis based on where countries are today relative to the global mean for each indicator, and normalizing the direction so that we can say for each indicator, if more is better, the desirable direction of change is to the right. If less is better, the desirable direction of change is to the left. We normalized all of those. So what you're looking at here, everybody to the right of that global mean line, which is the vertical black line in the center, is doing better than the global average in that direction aligned to desirable change, and everybody to the left is doing less desirably, further away from the end of the spectrum of what we observe as the distributions of countries currently. So I'm saying that really precisely because we want to make sure it's clear there's been no normative establishment of benchmarks or thresholds here. That's something that we aim to do in future work. But what we're looking at here is just how spread out our current countries relative to each other right now against just this one establishment of which direction of movement of that indicator would be better. We can also look across at the country level, and what you see here is how countries rank on average per theme, and then the summed up to the like across all the themes. And then the point to take away here is that there's no country who's doing perfectly on every level. So I like to take the example of Ethiopia, which I don't think I animated in this particular slide, but you can see my pointer, it's here. They're doing quite well on resilience. So a lower bar means higher rank, so better. But Ethiopia is doing a lot less well on diets, nutrition, and health. So fatter bar means a lot of other countries are doing better than them, they're higher ranked. Okay, so just a couple key takeaways to conclude here. We think that it's really useful that we've done this, that this indicator framework has been developed, and that it can be used to track progress across global food systems. So it offers a lot of information, but not a really clear set of prescriptions or uniform actions. And I think that's a really important takeaway. There are no uniform actions. Nobody's perfect. Nobody's doing perfectly on every indicator. And not all the indicators are aligned to country income level. And so we really do need to take a dedicated food systems approach in order to tailor the actions to specific country contexts. And we need a monitoring system and appropriate data to be able to do that. We did find a bunch of critical data gaps through this process. And so these are things where we think they belong in the framework, but there is no suitable indicator at present or suitable data. And so we would like to add these as we go forward if the data become available. And you just see some of them here. And I just want to point out the ones that are especially pertinent to the topic of food environments, which are issues of food and loss and waste and food safety. We also have seen data gaps that are not at the indicator level, but are about coverage across countries and time. So here are some that have fewer country and time series coverage. And we've also seen that environmental indicators are really skewed towards production and do less well at capturing what goes on environmentally along the rest of food value chains. And we really just need more indicators of governance and resilience that are to conclude, see if I can mute that person. There we go. We have offered a conceptual framework. It's comprehensive and actionable, but can also be uses a menu that countries can tailor to their own needs. We intend to put out a paper every year and track progress to 2030, and to make updates to the framework and the indicators and data as needed if better data or more indicators become available. So again, just want to note this huge collaboration. These are all the authors of the baseline paper that's coming out in December. And I just want to make sure to say that they've all contributed an enormous amount of this work. So I represent all of their good work here today. And with that, I will just say thank you. And I'm happy to take questions. I told the organizers I unfortunately am double booked right now. And so I'm going to try and jump back and forth, but I'm really happy to take questions when the time comes.
Thank you so much, Kate. I think thanks to the audience for very fire-on question session.